Let's talk about something wild. The people who can fully suspend their disbelief for fire-breathing dragons, immortal elves, and world-ending ice zombies, but completely lose their minds when they see a black person in a fantasy show. In worlds where literally anything is possible, where magic exists, where people ride dragons, where a boy can survive being pushed out of a tower window, the presence of black and brown people is somehow seen as unrealistic or immersion-breaking. And before you rage quit the video right now and go to the comments, please watch at least 50% first, because chances are, whatever you're gonna say is gonna be addressed in the video. I will be focusing mostly on the House of the Dragon show, because it's the most well-known and also received the most backlash in recent years. Let's get into the essay. When HBO's House of the Dragon cast Steve Toussaint as Lord Corlys Velaryon, the wealthiest and most powerful seafarer in Westeros, the internet erupted, and the usual suspects made their little videos. Despite the fact that Corlys's race is never explicitly described in George R.R. Martin's source material, angry fans flooded social media with complaints about how this casting was inaccurate and, quote, destroyed their immersion. Toussaint himself responded perfectly, pointing out the absurdity, saying, quote, they're fine with dragons flying, with people having white hair and violet eyes, but a wealthy black man? That apparently crosses the line into the unbelievable, end quote. Think about what that really means. These people can accept that dragons, massive fire-breathing reptiles that defy all laws of physics and biology, exist in this world. They can believe in prophecies, shadow demons birthed from witches, wildfire explosions, and characters being resurrected from the dead. But a black nobleman? Suddenly, they need to fact-check the genealogical records of a completely fictional universe. Again, I repeat that. A completely fictional universe. Most people that complain about diversity in fantasy use this excuse, and I'm about to destroy it. Bad faith critics often frame their complaints around realism or historical accuracy.
And the fourth went full retard with a super diverse village in the middle of Romania.
This is an anti-woke YouTuber complaining about diversity in a show with vampires and night creatures.
Bruh.
There's many like him who do this. They'll argue that medieval European settings should only feature white people, conveniently ignoring several facts. First, these aren't historical dramas. They're fantasy worlds. Middle-earth is not Europe and Westeros is not England. They're imaginary places where the rules of our reality don't apply. If an author can invent an entire geography, create new species, and design systems of magic, they can absolutely decide that black people exist in their fictional universe. Who are you to say otherwise? Second, even actual medieval Europe was more diverse than these purists want to admit. There were African Romans in Britain like Emperor Septimus Severus and Quintus Lollius from Algeria, who both ruled at some point. Moorish influences in Spain, and traders from across the world interacting with European societies. But apparently, acknowledging this historical reality is too woke. Third, and this is the kicker, these worlds aren't trying to be medieval Europe. They borrow aesthetics, sure, but they also have dragons, magic, and social structures that bear little resemblance to actual medieval Europe. If you guys were really concerned about accuracy and realism, you would also ask why all these people have perfectly straight white teeth before toothpaste and toothbrushes existed. Picking and choosing which elements need to be historically accurate reveals what's really going on here. So, what is going on here? Let's call it what it is. Let's cut the bullshit. This isn't about realism, accuracy, or respecting source material. It's racism dressed up in the language of fandom gatekeeping. When someone can accept every fantastical element of a story, but draws the line at racial diversity, they're telling on themselves. They're revealing that their imagination, their sense of what's normal or believable, has been shaped by white supremacist thinking so deeply ingrained that even in worlds of pure imagination, whiteness is seen as the default, and everything else requires justification. Author Ebony Elizabeth Thomas, in her book The Dark Fantastic, which is a great book by the way, highly recommend, describes this as audiences being conditioned to see fictional worlds as inherently white spaces. When black characters appear in prominent roles, not as slaves, servants, or sidekicks, but as heroes, nobles, and protagonists, it disrupts the unconscious racial hierarchy that many viewers don't even realize they've internalized. That's why they had no problem with the black pirate or the black servants in Dorne, or the slaves that were all suspiciously brown, but had a problem with a noble house being black. And Toussaint said this himself when discussing the backlash. He said, quote, "When black characters in Game of Thrones were criminals, pirates, or slaves, there was no outcry. But make that character wealthy and noble, and suddenly it's a problem. The issue isn't the presence of black people, it's black people in positions of power and prestige." And I must agree. And personally, I think this whole controversy is so absurd because fantasy is supposed to be about limitless possibility. That's the core of fantasy. It's about imagining worlds where anything can happen, where the impossible becomes possible. That's literally the point of the genre. If you can imagine a world where dragons soar through the sky, wizards cast spells, elves live for thousands of years, dwarves forge magical weapons, dead men walk, prophecies come true, magic rings corrupt the soul. But you cannot imagine that same world, including black and brown people as heroes, leaders, and main characters? That's not a failure of storytelling. That's a failure of your imagination, deliberately limited by racial bias. And this isn't an isolated incident. It's a pattern that reveals something deeply uncomfortable about how certain audiences engage with fantasy media. The Lord of the Rings of Power. Amazon's series featured black elves and a black dwarf princess. And the racist harassment was so severe that the cast members described it as violent and aggressive. Princess Disa's portrayal by Sophia Numvet drew particular hate. People who accepted the existence of magical rings, immortal tree people, and a giant flaming eye somehow couldn't wrap their heads around dwarves having melanin. Marvel's Thor is another one. When Idris Elba was cast as Heimdall, critics claimed it violated Norse mythology. These same critics had zero issues with the fact that Thor fights alongside a talking tree and a gun-toting raccoon, travels through wormholes, and battles against purple aliens with magic stones. But a black Norse god? That was deemed historically inaccurate in a movie about interdimensional space Vikings. And it's even more unfortunate and disgusting when these people start attacking the actors themselves. I have a video on that. Check it out if you want. So how do we move forward? Well, the good news is that creators are increasingly refusing to cater to these complaints. Ryan Condal, showrunner of House of the Dragon, was explicit about his intentions. He wanted to create a show that wasn't just another bunch of white people on screen. George R.R. Martin himself had considered making the Velaryons black when writing the books. And despite the racist backlash, the show was massively successful. House of the Dragon had the biggest series premiere in HBO's history and is still going strong 2 seasons in, with a 3rd season in production and a 4th that will be the finale. Also, the fantasy genre is evolving, and the old excuses don't hold water anymore. If your fantasy world has room for dragons, elves, and witches, but not for diversity, the problem isn't with the people asking for inclusion. It's with the narrow confines of a worldview that can't imagine black people as anything other than marginal. So yes, it could be plain racism. In fact, when you strip away all the justifications and excuses, that's exactly what it is. And it's time we stop pretending otherwise. That's all for today, and I apologize for not posting in over a month. Anyways, press all the buttons. Bye.